Hello and welcome back to the One Take Show podcast. In this episode, we are in conversation with the wonderful Mr. Arnav Rao. Sir is a stand-up comic, and in this episode, we talk about his experience with law, and then subsequently, we talk about his experience with stand-up comedy, what got him started, what are the various fascinating stories that he has, and an amazing conversation in totality. So make sure you watch this episode in full, and also if you like this episode, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you have any suggestions or feedbacks, write them down in the comment section. I would love to read them. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's start the podcast.
You want something, go get it. Period.
2 and 1, we're recording. Hello, sir. Welcome to the One Take Show. I am really excited about this episode. Number one, I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan of your content. I genuinely love every piece that you put out, especially on YouTube with more than 1.75 million views on your channel. I think it's a classic. I genuinely love everything out there, and I'm really excited about this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad you liked the content. A lot of people did, so it's nice to meet the few who did.
I am so curious to know what has been your experience there, as in what kind of feedbacks you've received that you somehow realize that there's a section, because I read your interview and I watched that entire interview with Bar and Bench. I realized that there is an interesting conversation about free speech that brewed up there.
Yeah.
And you being a lawyer who's now turned into stand-up comedian has stand on both these spectrums. So I'm really excited to know about that perspective of yours.
Yeah, I mean, like, the way I see it is like you put something on the internet, anything can happen. And the charm of live stand-up, when you do put it out, I mean, it's like a kind of vicious cycle. Like the reason why we put out YouTube videos is so that people come and watch us.
Right.
And the idea is that we want people to just come and watch us. So you still have to put out some content. And I mean, like, people can get offended about like anything nowadays.
Yeah.
So yeah, in that sense, it's so bizarre. As to some of the things like that, there are comedians who've been targeted for making fun of a particular brand of bikes. There have been comedians who've been like threatened because they made jokes about DJs. So at one end of the spectrum, it's like absolutely ridiculous. Like anything can offend anybody, and that's the internet. So like when you're playing that game, I guess that's something that you have to like. It can't help but deal with that. With me specifically, with my content also being sort of controversial and sort of touching the lines, there is an aspect of fun to it, especially when you're doing those jokes live, when there's a live audience, because the live audience gets it. You're inside a comedy club. This is a comedy show. These are just jokes, right? This isn't a stump speech for like I'm trying to run for office. Right, these are just jokes. But the second you put it in YouTube, and now suddenly people are not seeing it in that context, even though like everything is put in place. Like there's a disclaimer. The title very categorically says that this is stand-up comedy. But then people like take things out of context, and they get offended. And when you're playing along with those lines, there is a lot of aspect to it, which is that's the fun of it, right? The reason you do jokes, like even in school, like right from school, like you're in college right now, there's a reason why you sit in the back bench, right? You make fun of your classmates, you make fun of each other, you make fun of the teachers. There is something about like, I get into trouble for doing jokes, right? But that's the fun of doing jokes. And like receiving the death threats and all, like that was like a bit like partially scary, like a political party spokesperson threatening to file an FIR, like in the middle of a pandemic. Like I don't understand what the priorities are, but it was partially scary. But I have to say, and like I can't help it, but they gave me an extra 10 minutes. So like if you get offended and then you come and you say all kinds of things to me, you please understand that you're feeding the beast. Like you're giving me more content.
Right. Right.
But I personally believe if you want to come and say like you hate my comedy, you have the right to do that. Like I don't disable comments on my videos. You want to say something mean, you want to say something bad, by all means, that's your right. I will fight for your right to say that. I won't respond. That's up to me. But yeah, overall, like majority has been positive. So at least that, like my likes to dislikes ratio on YouTube, it's at least the algorithm's like, okay, it's it's still in the positive point.
Right.
So yeah, that's the way I see it.
Absolutely. And I think to some extent, comedians, I personally believe that I'm a free speech absolutist. If it were to me, a lot of things would be very different than what they are right now. But I think in many of the scenarios, comedians specifically become very soft targets, easy targets for the trolls or such harsh form of criticisms extending to death threats, which I think is completely crossing the line in every possible imagination that there can be. So is that true? Like, do comedians actually become that soft target?
I mean, any artist is an easy target when it comes to speech. The way I see it is that speech at large is being attacked, right? Like journalists are being clamped down. The journalists are getting killed, right? There's a lot of this is also to do with the fact that all these so-called battles, so to speak, are being played out on social media. So it's not really whether you're legally right or legally wrong. It's just for this news cycle, I need something to feed this constant 24/7 thing. And everything is getting clamped in that sense. Like TV shows are getting censored, movies are getting censored. Uh, I'm doing a bunch of screenwriting the last year or so. I've been doing a lot of writing projects. And at that very inception level stage itself, certain ideas are just being like, no, it'll never get made. We cannot do this, cut it out right now. Right. So in that sense, there's censorship in general. Okay. Now comedians are battling that, so we're one side of that. The the fact that comedians are easy target, yeah, but that's any artist who's being targeted. When like I just personally feel there have to be bigger issues. It can't be that today nothing happened. Like nothing happened
Right.
worldwide. Like the only thing that happened was this comedian's joke, that artist song, that artist
Yeah.
painting, that movie scene. That not
Mhm.
even movie scene. Now it's like the trailer only is enough to offend me. Like without context of understanding what the show is about, what the
Yeah.
full story is.
Mhm. Mhm.
So like you have to like take it with a pinch of salt. Like if you don't engage, I don't think how far it can get escalated. It can, in certain cases, it has gotten escalated, and that's where being a
Yeah.
lawyer is just like that's slightly advantageous. That like okay, I'm
Mhm.
like I know what all I have to put in place so that
Right.
I'm safe in that sense.
Mhm. I'm sure. I mean, as a comic's job is to essentially make statements which are at expense of someone. Like the idea of jokes is to create the controversy, the
Yeah,
uneasiness, the
it's
discomfort.
very hard writing victimless jokes. That is that is
Yeah.
true. Uh, but yeah, I like there are people who do clean content and they're very successful in doing it, and some of them are really great. I'm not saying that it's like bad comedy, but uh, being clean for them is something that comes naturally to them. So there are some comedians, if they try coming on stage and they swear or they do dirty jokes, it doesn't make sense because that's not who they are. Now me and my friends, like from growing up, it's filth. It's been filth. It's been as controversial as possible.
Yeah.
I got exposed to stand up at a very young age, so sort of like that makes you already gravitate towards, okay, who are the people who made it and like why have they made it, and who do you personally look up to, and you end up looking up towards the controversial comics, then that's the kind of comedy you're going to end up doing.
Yeah. Did you ever have a comic hero, someone that you generally looked up to?
So the first ever comedian I saw was like a stand-up DVD that my dad bought for me uh, when I was like 13 or 14 years old. It's a comedian called Dave Allen. I still hold him in like probably the highest
Mhm.
regard. He's an Irish comedian. He passed away in like 2004, but he is just phenomenal, and he's very similar to, at least I would like to think, in terms of style, we're very similar. Which is basically like observations wrapped in stories, which is basically what most of my content is.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. And you mentioned that I mean, I've tried to make this conversation as spontaneous as possible, but I'm really sorry. Despite your
No,
warning,
no, no.
I'm
Go
trying
ahead. Go
to,
ahead.
I'm going to make it a little bit about the law and the law students.
Sure,
One
sure.
is
Go for it.
that you were a lawyer. Now, you said that since you were a lawyer, you identify that if there is going to be a conflict, you are better equipped to handle it than most of the other comics. So, from that experience of law school and then working in the legal industry and then moving to stand up, my first question is obviously, is there an interplay? And does that interplay helps you out today as a comic?
So the way I actually see it is like when I was graduating from so I went to law school in England, and when I was graduating from law school, like at that whatever what is it called, convocation speech, whatever.
Yeah.
Our vice chancellor basically what he said was, he's like, what we've given you is a skill set. Uh, and in England, like my batch is like the size of 200, of which majority, like I'd say like there would have been only 10 or 15 of us out of the 200 who had plans of practicing as lawyers. Nobody else had plans. In England, it's a 3-year degree, an LLB honors, and it's a very powerful degree to have. That's what they're basically trying to tell you, because when you leave law school, what are the skill sets you leave? You can consume a lot of information in a short amount of time. You're able to analyze that information. You can now critically analyze it, and then convey that critical analysis in either written format or spoken format, right? Now that is a skill set that any industry wants. Okay,
True.
any like you're hired. Like you can do this, you're hired. Okay,
Yeah.
it works. I'm not, no joke. It genuinely works, and so I apply that same skill set to stand up. It's if you pursue law, and if you studied law and then you're doing something else with your life, you're still applying those skill sets of law. So what the law degree is, it's not really
Yeah.
applying the law itself, like not statute and like precedents, but the that muscle memory of yeah, what 1000 pages, that's all you're given. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is what I feel is key for anybody who's thinking of doing something outside of law, even though they've spent whatever that that long duration of studying law and then choosing to become lawyers. The one thing you can reassure yourself with, that basic skill set is applicable in any industry.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and the second thing which I'll say, which is the same what my vice chancellor said when we were graduating college, was he said, what we've given you is, we've given you a skill set that helps you, you're prepared for luck, right? So when there is bad luck, you know how to put your head down and do the work that needs to be done. When there's
Right.
good luck, you know how to capitalize when there's good luck. That's it. That's what we've given you. That's what college is. That's what we aim to teach you. So yeah, so if whatever journey you're doing, there's going to be a grunt. I know it sounds all
Yeah.
glamorous, you're doing stand up, or you're choosing to do some form of the arts and all that, but whatever work, whatever field you decide to go into, there is a certain amount of monotony and grunt work that has to be done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No. Yeah.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No. Please continue.
No, I just like, I don't want to sound like I'm giving too much advice. It's the last piece of gyan that I'm going to give. But this is like, it's not even mine, which is why I can give it. It's when I was
Right.
quitting law to become a stand-up comedian, this is what my dad, it
Mhm.
was his advice to me, which was it's not about the pursuit of happiness, it's about the happiness in the pursuit. Which
Wow.
means your daily drudgery, you have to find fun. If you don't find that fun, then there's no point pursuing whatever you're pursuing. There is going to be grunt work. Whatever you choose, there's going to be grunt work. There's going to be a monotony. You have to enjoy that. If you enjoy that, then it's like we've heard enough drunk people say, dude, it's about the journey, not the destination. It's just that.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
End of gyan.
No, please keep it coming. I can see a Constitution of India back there in your wonderful bookshelf. I'm just wondering
there
if
is, there is one.
if that's your Barak or if it's someone else's.
No, it's mine. This is my house.
So
I live here.
so essentially, no. I'm just wondering if there's someone else who has, because the immediate image in my head was, you can always take a lawyer out of law, but you cannot necessarily separate the two. And I think with that preface, the question is that when you talk about all these wonderful skill sets that obviously a law school trains us for, and so many people have said that all these skills are then to be applied in the real world practice, and you actually did that. When making the choice of getting into stand-up comedy, how do you apply those skills in stand-up comedy? And the reason why I'm asking this question is, a lot of my friends actually are passionate about stand-up comedy. They want to perhaps take this up. All they are wondering is if this education will go waste, the 5 years of law school, will that go waste essentially, or can we use it
Yeah,
in
to some
stand-up
extent it
comedy?
is. To some extent, you can think about, yeah, it's gone. To some extent. Uh, at the end of the day, like right now, my peers are people who have studied engineering. Is not some of them have done medicine. Some people have done BCom. One person's a college dropout, but we're all equals, right? So to some extent, yeah, it doesn't mean shit. Genuinely, forget about it. But it's up to you. The one thing, like if you manage to like go through the rigor of law school, you can go through the rigor of anything. Like there is hard work in stand up. There's a lot of rejection. Daily you sign up for, that's basically when you have a show, you're basically agreeing to, I could be rejected today. That's it, right? And there is a learning curve of figuring it out. Yeah, you can sit and watch as many stand-up specials as you can. The only thing that I say, and then analyze them and then break it down onto Excel sheet, and you can do all that. You can do, there is a science to the stand-up. And like for me personally, like I, before the pandemic, like when I used to do like paid shows, when it's like a ticketed event or like it's a private event that's paying a lot of money, every joke that's there, even if it's just a 1 minute joke, that joke has gone through 40 open mics before,
Right.
right? And that same 5 minute set, I have 40 different audio recordings of the same 5 minutes, and I listen to all 40 recordings of the same 5 minutes. Then I'll see which lines are working, which lines are not working, remove the lines that are not working. Which line's getting the biggest laugh, that has to be the ending. So restructure the bit so that that becomes the closer. So there's a lot of science, a lot of trial and error, and a lot of like just experimentation, observation noted down, right? So that's note taking is yeah, law school, that's easy.
Right.
The crazy thing is that once you whatever said and done, you can do all this homework, you can practice, you can rehearse. I do that from time to time. Like I spend 2 hours a day just running through all my jokes and seeing if I can add more or try a different way. I do that. I do practice. And I'm still this okay only. So can you imagine if I didn't practice? But uh,
Yeah.
the best learning is getting on stage. So the more you get on stage, that's it. That's the only learning that is there for stand up. Get on stage
Right.
as much as possible. And so if anybody is interested in wanting to do stand up, find out, look, go on Google, search on Facebook or social media for open mics happening around you. Speak to the comics, figure out how to get spots. Everybody has their own way. Some are online registration, some are on the spot. I don't know. It's all different. I don't produce shows anymore, so
Yeah.
I don't with that headache. But just do it. That's it. That's the only advice I can give is because I'm also figuring it out. Like I've been doing it for like just over 5 years right now, and I don't know for sure what works, what doesn't work. Like I have a vague set, I have the skill set, like I know I can work the room, I know I'll make them laugh, but there are days where it doesn't happen. And I'm only 5 years in. 5 years is nothing in like the long term thing of what stand up actually is. Like every comic that we look up to in the West, nobody makes it like minimum 10 to 12 years. Like there's nothing, you won't even get like 10 minutes on TV. And here in India, you have the phenomenon of YouTube, which catapults anybody overnight into fame, which is great in that sense. But at the same time, we're way more nascent in that sense. So I know that like my dad also asked me like how long are you going to take to, you're medium successful, you're not fully successful, but like how long do you think it'll take for you to be fully successful? And I was like, dude, you don't drink a whiskey that's less than 16 years old, no? So give me also
Right.
16 years to like, I'll become single
Wow.
malt, dude. You give me that time. And he's like, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool. So yeah, you just find your analogies.
Right. I'm going to use this analogy every time my father asks me, how long is it going to take you to be successful in litigation? It's definitely going to take me way longer than you
Oh yeah,
expect.
it's the same. Like in litigation, also it's you don't get a lot of money for a very long period of time, and then you just get a stupid amount of money for no reason, which is exactly like stand up. There's a lot of similarities in that sense. Plus, friends and family always wanted to be pro bono,
Right. Right.
so whether it's legal services or jokes.
Well, who knew that litigation and stand up would be so dangerously similar? I just need to bring it up in every next conversation I have with a litigator. I need to throw this analogy at them. But it's fascinating. I think I was listening to one conversation with that was on Joe Rogan's podcast with Kevin Hart. He was describing how he takes about 2 years to write a special, where he goes through an entire process of going through open mics across the country, various ways, and then crafting it out again and again and again. So the idea that stand-up comedy is the perception or the narrative usually amongst people is that either you're born funny and all you have to do is just climb up on the stage, start speaking, and someone will record the video of yours. It'll go up on YouTube, and boom, now you're successful. Now you have millions of viewers and you have millions of audience, and now you're making a lot of money. But there are major challenges that you actually have to grapple with, especially in the initial stages.
Yeah, I mean, like you don't put out content till you have like a backup of content. You know what I mean? Like at a very simple level, like if you're going to put out, say, hypothetically, a 1 hour Netflix special, right? But that's much later on. I'm saying, like, let's say for India and YouTube, let's say I put out 3 videos each 10 minutes, right? So I put out half an hour worth of content. Now, let's say it goes viral. Now you want to come and see me. How much content do I have now? Right? I will only release when I have like an hour ready. I'll drop 10 minutes when I know I still have the hour, so that whoever wants to come and watch me I still have content to do. Right? There's one, it's like an unsaid, unwritten rule, which is you don't drop a special unless you have like 3 hours of content. That's when you drop 1 hour, so that you go famous and then people want to come and see you. You have stuff to tell them. The other thing is the aspect of like being born funny. To some extent, yes. I mean, it's just a knack. Like every comic I know, like who are my friends, who I'm close to, as well as comedians that I look up to, and for me personally, like we wanted to be the funny guy in the room, like from a very young age. Right? Like my first open mic, it was my friends who pushed me saying, "You're a funny guy, go do this. Like stop telling us jokes, go tell everybody else." Right? It was like they got me my first open mic spot, like my friends, and I owe them like crazy for that. And so like there is that knack, but at the end of the day, I think it was Akash Mehta, is a comedian from Bombay. He basically said that like being funny is like it's like a muscle. So if you train it, which is what we do by open micing every day, by getting on stage as often as possible, we're fit. It's just that it's a muscle that you can train. So anybody can train that. If you, the beauty of stand up is you can't get worse. Like whatever level you start, and then you just you can't get worse. That it's the beauty. So you'll grow the longer. Like it took Louis CK like almost 2 or 3 years before he got his first laugh of just doing open mic. So and for each person individually can like different journeys. So that's, I wouldn't like I would recommend, if anybody wants to try it at least before you make a decision one way or the other.
I think it was Howard Stern's show where he was having a conversation with Trevor Noah, and they were talking about what makes a comic really funny. And Trevor mentioned Dave Chappelle, and he said that Dave Chappelle has such an audience primarily because he's so interesting more than he's just funny. The fact that a person is really interesting, and I think I observed I caught up on something like that when I started researching on this episode, when I was looking up your channel, and you have a couple of thumbnails that I have huge respect for, by the way. one of them being more than one view, and the other being less than 1 million views. So yeah, I think that's the kind of interesting gravity or the aura that a personality creates, and then suddenly they have people listening to them.
Yeah.
So essentially,
it's weird. It's kind of weird having people who are like, I don't have like a very big fan following, but I do have some fans, and that's like it blows my mind. Like it's so confusing. I'm like, really, me? Why? There's just so much better out there. But it's nice. It's a very, I mean, like we do this because we want validation, and so when you get that validation, it's obviously an awesome feeling. But I don't think my fans are too diehard though. Like I had one fan like who bought tickets for my show and then sends me a message saying, "I slept off. I'm sorry, I missed the show." I'm like, "Oh wow, great."
You actually got a message like this?
Yeah. He apologized saying, "I bought a ticket. I slept off, so I missed the show." And I'm like, "Oh, great, dude. Thanks for telling me. That
Okay.
I feel so good now.
Nice. Perfect. But for example, one of the sets that I was watching was about this discrepancy of South Indians versus North Indians. And you're,
Yeah.
I think every viewer of this podcast, by this episode particularly, I am muting half of the time because I don't want any audio feedback, but I'm laughing continuously. And one of the reasons is because so is so interesting. And if you want to see how interesting he is, just check out these videos, man. And I think with that,
Yes. Subscribe, like, share, subscribe, whatever it's supposed to say.
I mean, with
By the way,
your
just out of curiosity, where is this podcast going? Like, where is this going to air?
this is going to air on. So I'm very proud of the fact where all it is. Not proud of the fact with about the subscriber base that I have, but the
That don't
reach
worry.
is
Even
huge.
my podcast has 50 subscribers, but don't worry. It's okay.
It actually goes out of 15 different platforms, from
Okay.
YouTube,
Wow.
Spotify to Apple Podcasts, then to JioSaavn, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, everywhere, and amassing somewhere around 5,000 people listening to it. I mean, that's about
Hey, that's way better than our podcast, man. Like,
it.
good job for you, man.
No, I mean, obviously, there's you have videos with more than 800,000 views. I don't think
No, that's
there's a
why
comparison.
that's the stand-up channel. We have another. I have a podcast called Between Two Raws with my fellow comedian Ravi Rao,
Oh,
and
really?
so that's on a separate YouTube channel called Between Two Raws, and that has 50 subscribers.
Perfect. You'll get two more from this video. I
Great, we'll
subscribed,
take
and
some.
so
We'll
will
take
my
some.
mother.
Great,
Yeah,
great.
both of
Yeah,
us are
we'll take
getting it.
some.
Perfect. And
Although I don't recommend, I just genuinely I don't recommend that your mom should watch the podcast.
no, she
Like
could.
under no.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great, but like you watch it first before you tell your mom like yeah go ahead, because Ravi and I are quite outlandish in the
Okay.
podcast. We're like nobody's
Mhm.
watching. We've said some crazy shit.
No, I see
So
that Illuminati sign behind you, and I have huge expectations of this podcast now. Yeah.
yeah, it's a fun podcast. We just drink and then just like say
Mhm.
random shit. That's basically what the podcast is.
Which basically I think is the entire podcast industry. Anyone doing anything else is just pretending. Yeah, I think that's how the
That's
podcasts
true.
work. But I think I mean, I do have to somehow conclude this conversation,
Yeah, sure.
as sad as it gets. But
Yeah,
we have to. My last set of questions for you, obviously, is going to be something where I'm going to ask for your advice, and one of them is for example, someone who is already in law school, because that's who I think I reach out to the most. Most of the viewers of this podcast are law students, so.
Okay.
Like I love roast. There are roast sessions in Dr. Ramanuli and National Law University. We have roast sessions,
Okay.
we have stand-up sessions, and I do participate very actively in them. And so do a lot of other people, right? And if they want to try their hand at stand-up or are very serious about it, what would your suggestion be? Is there a blueprint, first of all, if there is, and if there is, then what is it that we can do about it?
Okay. There is. I mean, like the basic thing is there's a premise, setup, punchline, but no, I wouldn't like. So that's the thing. If it's your first open mic, and I've been asked this at open mics, and like this is my first or my second open mic, I tell them one thing and one thing only. I'm like, don't come and ask for advice till you have done that same joke 20 times. You do it 20 times, you yourself will know what works and what doesn't work. The same 5 minutes. You write down 5 minutes, practice it, do whatever you want, whatever, act out. I have no restrictions. Talk about whatever you want to talk about, that's fine. So write 5 minutes. Try and make it personal because that's easier because it gives you longevity. And one thing about comedy which they always one word that gets thrown around a lot is honesty, and that's, I mean, yeah, you can play a character on stage and that also works, and that's up to you if you're more leaning towards like acting and stuff like that, but that's fine. That's up to you. I don't want to like write your material for you, so there's no blueprint as such. Write 5 minutes, get on stage, do it 20 times. You know if you're getting a laugh, you're not getting a laugh for the same jokes, and you do it more times, you'll think, hey, I can do it this way, right? uh that broadly, that's what I'm going to say. One very important rule: please don't plagiarize. uh if you've seen a joke as a meme, you saying that doesn't like, there's nothing great. That's, you might get a laugh, but that's not original. Try your best to be original, have an original perspective. Don't copy jokes. That's a big The second you get labeled as like a joke thief or somebody who copies jokes, like the comedy circuit kind of shuns you, and rightly so, because there's no protection in that sense for comics who have like jokes getting stolen. Like I know, like I wouldn't say like my jokes been stolen as such, but like these are jokes that I had written, and then I discover that a Western comic has done like pretty much the same thought or the same punchline years ago. I just didn't know, and so I dropped that joke. I don't do that joke anymore because it's out there in the public domain.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Also, I don't recommend for newcomers to try and go the Daily Show, the Trevor Noah route, or like like tweet, or like you can do the tweeting on like, oh, this is a news thing, I want to do a joke on the today's news item and tweet it. That's great. You can develop a social media following if you're regular at it. And like I hate social media and I'm very irregular. I just do it because I have to. It's an occupational hazard. But if you're good at that, then great. But remember that you lose that joke. Like think about like in 1 year's time, will that joke still be relevant? Can I still perform that joke? So think about like in 5 years time, can I still perform this joke? Or if I put this joke on YouTube today, 5 years from now, will that joke still be okay on its own? Right? Is it too heavy on references? These are again like these are just personal stuff. If you want a very specific blueprint, then I recommend looking up Scott Dickers. He was one. I'll text you the name so you can like you can share the. Scott Dickers was one of the founders of The Onion, which is why I have the Our Dumb Centuries, The Onion newspaper, the original fake news guys, but they did it for satirical purposes. So Scott Dickers says that there are only 11 types of jokes. So I don't know if you've heard this thing. There are only 7 types of stories.
Okay, I haven't.
So he lists out this thing that there are only 11 types of jokes. That like basically any joke or any a bit that you take will have a mix of all of these. So 1 second, I should have that written down. I have it written somewhere. Hang on a second. I'll just quickly read out what they are. Wait, why can't I seem to find it?
No worries. I'll put in my feeble attempt at humor by inserting the 1 minute later video in this part of the transition.
Okay, yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are only 11 jokes. This is Scott Dickers' list. And so the first is irony, which is like if you want me to give you an example of irony, it's basically an alcoholic father disappointed in a pothead son.
Yeah.
Irony. Then you have a character which is a comedic character and whatever the traits of that comedic character are. Then you have reference humor, which is a lot of your topical news stuff and stuff, right? Or like you're referring to a TV show, just reference in that sense. So one advice with reference that I always tell people is if you're doing a reference, make your reference the premise, not the punchline, right? So if you're talking about a TV show, then tell me about the TV show. So even I've not seen the TV show, I still get the joke and you make that parts of it funny. As opposed to the ending of some random joke, you've just connected some other TV show. I will not understand that joke unless I know the reference and this reference. So that's that's just a personal pet peeve again. Then you have shock value, which is a lot of dark humor and stuff. Then you have hyperbole, which is exaggeration. You have parody, which is basically mimicking something. You have wordplay, which is the worst form of comedy, but allowed from time to time judiciously. Then you have analogies. You then have madcap, which is sort of kind of all-compassing of like just crazy stuff. Then you have meta humor, which is sort of making fun of the process of making humor. And then you have misdirection, which is basically I'm leading you one way and then with one line I flipped it all together. So these are 11 jokes. Like every joke, when you hear it, it'll fall under one of these 11. Now, instead of reverse engineering that, what I do is if there's a premise of mine that I sometimes I just riff on stage. And keep in mind that part of the writing process of stand-up is performing stand-up. So no matter how much you sit and write your notes and color code and put tabs and all that, some of my best lines have come to me while I've been on stage performing that the 30th time or the 40th time, or there's some
Right.
moment that happens.
Mhm.
Uh, but if something's not working, you can look at these 11 and say, okay, I was trying this. Maybe I can look at this as another writing technique to approach the same thought. If
Mhm.
anybody wants a blueprint, that's about all I have. Otherwise, it's just get on stage, do it as often as possible.
No, wonderful. I mean, I first of all, I never heard of this. I never heard of the 7 types of stories as well. And I think when I was asking you a question on blueprints, I wasn't expecting that it would actually get this comprehensive. But I'm really grateful for it. I think it's sort of like a trade secret that I any professional would
It's
not
not a
necessarily
trade
divulge.
secret. It's not a trade secret. It's not like, oh, nothing. No. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Only getting on stage. That's all that matters. Getting on
Mhm.
stage as often as possible. That's all that matters.
Right, fair. I think this is absolutely wonderful. This is one of the very rare conversations that I was completely off track and so enjoyable in every possible aspect.
Hey,
Um,
thank you, man. Very kind of you to say.
no, first, thank you so much for actually gracing this podcast. I was really sort of nervous before we started this
Don't
podcast.
grace and all. Okay, just I don't deserve so much respect and all. Calm down.
But still, I think with this, I think the idea that now this entire process of yours is going to evolve with everything changing around us. There's one question which I think is my last question to you is obviously
Right.
that with changing times and all, how do you see your craft evolving in the future? I mean, with COVID, with the market changing, with every consumption of the content changing, how do you see your craft evolving?
Uh, so yeah, that's a good question because COVID has really thrown a monkey wrench into everybody's plans. And as some experts are saying, we're going to live like this till November of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of uncertainty of where this is going. Like I said earlier, I've been very fortunate. I got lucky with screenwriting work and sort of got one project, did well on that project, and then the other writers in the writing room were like, hey, these other projects are also available. So and they were all very very lucrative. So
Yeah.
it was like safe in that sense.
Yeah.
All my bad habits I can afford, and
Right.
it's so for the foreseeable future right now, I'm not trying to make any very long term plans because I really don't know what the future holds right now. Sort of like living it like short term goal to short term goal, and sort of build as much of savings as I can right now. So I'm doing a lot of writing work.
Mhm.
I'm doing
Right.
stand up on Zoom, which
Mhm.
is fine. Okay, it was a learning curve for me. It is a learning curve for the audience as well, and I don't mind
Yeah.
doing them. I've had some really fun Zoom shows, but it's just
Mhm.
nothing compared to live. And so I'm happy doing the
Yeah.
Zoom shows because I'm like the goal is one day we will come back to life.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
in terms of the craft of stand up, that's my main focus. As soon as things open up, like the writing can take a backseat, I've built my savings back to stand up. And stand up and writing, like there's enough. One thing this pandemic taught me is that there are enough hours in the day to be very, very productive. And it's kind of weird, but I've been mad productive in the last 1 year or so, and
Yeah.
written a lot, like both stand up as well as
Mhm.
like long form stuff. And yeah, I don't want to like commit to any plan right now because I really don't know what is going to be possible and what's not going to be possible. The dream which I will have to achieve before I can like potentially like my put my mind at ease is doing that world tour of stand up one day, hopefully,
Mhm.
which will be sold out, and like it'll be great
Mhm.
to do that, to
Yeah.
travel the entire world. Like my dream is to actually live out of a suitcase and
Mhm.
just being traveling the world doing stand up, and hopefully that can happen again. And I'll be good
Right.
enough by the time I'm able to do so.
Right. Perfect. Perfect. I think that's very inspiring in one way or the other. Number one, the productivity part, I'm bang on. I think what COVID has done is completely shown our vulnerabilities and has put the finger down on us and shown us that see now you have
No,
time,
I
now
mean,
you don't have the excuses.
no, that is one way, but I live in
Mhm.
Bangalore, man. So 3 hours of just traffic used to go in attending open mics. That has really
Right.
been removed from. So There are
Yeah.
I do 18-hour days now, and it's great. Like I enjoy what I get to do, and yes, I wish I could get more sleep, but it's fun.
Right, perfect. I think this was a wonderful, wonderful conversation and a fun conversation for that matter, a break from the kind of conversations that this channel is usually accustomed to, and something that I was really looking forward to. Thank you so much for taking time off, and thank you
Hey,
so
thanks
much
for
for sitting
having
down
me.
with me. And
Thanks for
before we
having me.
wrap
It
up,
was good talking.
do you have any closing remarks for our viewers?
Like, share, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like,
Perfect.
share, subscribe to my podcast channel Between Two Rows, and
Yeah.
you can follow me at Arnav Rao on Twitter and Instagram. And
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know, man. Like, guys, just stay safe, stay sound, wear your mask, sanitize your hands. Just be
Right.
safe, guys. Chill.
राइट जब तक दवा नहीं तब तक कोई परवाही लापरवाही नहीं है समथिंग ऑफ दैट सॉर्ट परफेक्ट
Yeah.
ऑलराइट थैंक यू सो मच